Hello viewer, welcome to our today's lesson. In our today's lesson, we are looking about internal control system. I'm your lecturer, John Kabucho, Auditing and Assurance. Welcome. In our today's lesson, we are looking about issues relating to the internal matters of a company and how we can control errors and fraud in that particular company. This topic is going to cover, among other issues, the definition of the internal control system, internal control system. I know you have heard of this particular term, even if maybe perhaps you have never used this particular term, you have heard maybe people talking about lack of controls. The internal control system has so many areas because we have one, the definition part. The definition is very common and sometimes they do examine that one. So it is good you understand that definition and know how maybe to frame it. Then we have what we refer to as the components of internal control system. Components of ICS. And we also have something we refer to as the general internal control system that we're supposed to be looking at. General controls. Once we look on those particular areas, then we can go to another particular area. We refer to it as the internal control system in practice. So here we'll introduce ICS in practice. ICS is a designation of what we refer to as what? Internal control system. And then we'll be introducing issues relating to purchases, ICS on purchases and creditors. We'll be combining the two. And we're also going to introduce what we refer to as sales and debtors controls. That is an application area. Another area we'll be looking at is salaries and wages. Salaries and wages is also referred to as the payroll cycle or the payroll controls. Salaries and wages, internal control system. We'll also be looking about issues relating to advantages of internal control system, advantages of ICS. And we're also going to be looking on something we refer to as the issues relating to limitations, limitations of internal control system. So what we are going to do, we are going to introduce the definition in this lesson. So here we'll be having definitions and objectives. And we're also going to introduce components and then general controls. Then the next lesson is going to be looking on the internal control system. So at today's lesson, we'll reach this particular part of general controls, and then this other part is going to be covered in those other lessons. Welcome. In the definition part, the definition part of the internal control system is very simple. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try and manage the definition together with the objective so that we can see whether we can be able to define the two. Look at these particular wordings. When I say the definition, we'll say it means a system, a whole system of controls, a whole system of controls established to ensure. Now this is the part that you need to know, the part that I'm going to introduce the objectives. To ensure, colon, 1, that there is adherence to management policies. That is one of the objectives, but still part of the definition. Number 2, ensure there is efficiency and effectiveness in business operations. There's another objective, but it's still going to be forming part of the definition. And then we have this word, to safeguard the company's asset, to safeguard the company's assets. That is part of the objective, is still part of the definition. Then we have this part, to prevent and detect errors and frauds on a timely basis. Errors and frauds on a timely basis. There. And lastly, to ensure accuracy and completeness of records. To ensure accuracy, and completeness of records. So if I wanted to have a definition, my definition will start there. But you cannot understand this definition and you cannot be able to master the definition unless you have the objectives. So once you know the objectives of the internal control system is the adherence to management policy to ensure efficiency and effectiveness of the business operations, to safeguard the company's asset, to prevent and detect errors and frauds on a timely basis, and to ensure accuracy and completeness of the what? Of the records. Once you know those particular objectives, the definitions become easier. Look at my definition. And this time, that definition contains the objective. But this time, I don't want to put it in form of what? In form of point form. I'll put it in form of one particular what? Line or statement. We say, ICS is a whole system of controls established by management of an entity to run the business of an entity, the business of an entity in an orderly and efficient manner. That was the first objective that we had, comma, and then you put the other one, adherence to management policies, another comma. Then you put the point number 3, safeguard to company's asset, you put another what? Comma. And then you put that point number 3, number 4, prevention and detection of errors and frauds, and then you pick the last statement which says, and to secure as far as possible the accuracy and completeness of records, and to ensure completeness and accuracy of records. That forms the definition. If so, the part I was explaining is this part here. And I was saying, if you know the definition, then you have the what? The objectives. What is the definition? The definition means it is a whole system of controls in a company. Those controls are established by the management of an entity to run the business of an entity in an orderly and efficient manner, to ensure adherence to management policies, to safeguard the company's assets, prevention and detection of errors and frauds on a timely basis, and to secure as far as possible completeness and accuracy of records. That is my definition. Having introduced the definition, then I have also to list the objective. If you ask me what are the objectives of the internal control system, I'll just eliminate that part of the definition, and then I'll bring this statement. I'll say the objectives of the internal control system, objectives of ICS. Fair. Now we are completing that particular part. The objectives of the ICS are derived from what we refer to as the what? The definition. So if you can be able to define it clearly, then the objectives will come handy. So you say, one of the objectives is to ensure that those policies established by the management are being complied with. The other objective is to ensure that we are running the company without what? Wastage, and we are meeting the desired goals of the company. The other objective is to do what? If we have company's asset, those assets are not misused. And then we have the point here, if we have errors, those errors can be detected and prevented as early as possible. And because we have frauds in an organization, we can be able to prevent those frauds before they expose the company to heavy losses. Lastly, We want to ensure that each and every record or financial statement maintained by the company is complete and accurate. I believe you have understood that particular definition. I don't think it's that difficult. So once you master that definition, you can also master the objectives, either of the two. Once you know the definition, you can be able to do the objectives. Once you know the objectives, you can do the what? The definition. Because those are the objectives, they form the part of the definition, and that will make your work much easier. From the definition and the objectives, I would like now to go ahead and perhaps give you a simple now idea of what controls are. The simplest of all ideas. So we want to know now, we want to introduce this one in our daily life. In our daily life. If you have a country, the country where you come from has a what? Has laws and has what? Has regulations, and these one are mostly enshrined from the Constitution. The laws and regulations governing the country are called internal controls in that country. Internal controls in that country. If you have a home, perhaps in your home you don't keep millions of money in your home. You usually say, if I get maybe 50,000, I should not be having that money in my house. 50,000 should be banked immediately. And that becomes what? Banking of cash is a control. It helps you a lot to manage your resources much easier. If you have maybe a hospital, you should have a what? You should know the controls in a hospital. For example, the data in the hospital should not be shared with outsiders. So we can say maintain key and lock for patient information. Patient information. Never share any patient information because it's supposed to be kept confidential. Maybe you have heard about what? A church, or perhaps you do visit a mosque. And maybe from there you can also be able to tell a number of controls that makes your place of worship becomes easy. Maybe efficiency and operations are run smoothly. So we can say, for example, queuing. When we queue, that is what is a control. When we contribute something in the church, some people call that offerings or collections. All that collections must be banked. Failure to bank it, it may be stolen. Even if we are dealing with people maybe who are of high integrity, we still don't want to take chances. Even if you go to places like in churches, you will find there is segregations of duties. We don't have one person doing everything. We segregate, we divide duties among the congregations or maybe the brethren in that church. So we have segregations of duties. That becomes part of the what? Controls. So for me, in a simplest idea, the term controls means policies and procedures. Policies and procedures established within a what? An entity by those charged with governance. So if you go to a company and you find the directors and maybe people who are managers of that company, they have established policies and procedures. Those policies and procedures will help them ensure what? That the company is run without wastage, that the assets are safeguarded, that we don't have maybe frauds, we don't have errors, and we have policies being complied with, and again, all the records in that organization are what? Are complete and accurate. I hope now you have an idea of what is a control. I have heard people say, in my home place, my dad does not allow me to come maybe after 10. And if I go maybe after 10 p.m., there will be crisis. There will be issues. That is a control. He wants to ensure that your home is run smoothly. I have heard of people saying that I cannot sleep in my home without doing my homework. That is still part of what? Controls. You are trying to put some controls in your place of work or your place of maybe residence so that you can be able to run smoothly. So having introduced that one, it is good we introduce this one, components of internal control system. Something I forgot to tell you is that the ISA that governs internal control system is now ISA 315 and ISA 330. If you go to those particular two standards, the international standards on auditing number 315 and number 330, you'll be able to find these components. In the ISA number 330, the components of ICS are 5 components of internal control system, and they are: 1, the control environment. Control environment. And 2, we have what we refer to as the risk assessment procedures. And then we have 3 here, what we refer to as the control procedures. Number 4 here, we have what we call information system and business processes. Information system and business processes. That is part of the what? The components of internal control system. Number 5, we have what we refer to as monitoring of controls. Because I'm assuming that you are doing auditing and assurance, this part is very, very important. Make sure you know always that the components of ICS, are 5. They are not more than 5, they are not 10, they are not 15. The components of ICS, they are 5. The 5 components of ICS, we have control environment, risk assessment procedures, control procedures, information system and business processes, and we have monitoring of controls. I repeat, the components of internal control system are 5. We have control environment, risk assessment procedures, control procedures, information system and business processes, and then we have monitoring of controls. These are the tools that you cannot stay without when you're introducing the internal control system in your company, or if you want your internal control system to be what? To be effective. I'm going to delete this part here, but remember the next thing that we are headed to is what? General controls that we are supposed to be working. Again, earlier on I had said that we will be moving to ICS in practice in our next lesson. For the time being, we need to discuss these two, the components of ICS and general controls. That is what I want to clear here for. So we are introducing those components of ICS. The short form of ICS, or the short form of internal control system, is ICS, which means internal control system. So as much as I use the word ICS, I hope you can understand it means internal control system and don't get confused. It's also acceptable whenever you are doing an exam to go ahead and use the word ICS. It's something that is maybe known all over the world or worldwide. So it is not a crime, or is not unethical, or is not against the rules in maybe covering the exam to use the word internal control system or as ICS. So once you tell the examiner ICS, he knows exactly what you mean by that particular term. So the components of ICS, we start with this particular term, control environment. I'll explain them from here. Control environment. Control environment. Usually, whenever you are introducing the internal control system, the first thing that you have to think of is what we refer to as the management of the company. And the question you ask yourself is, does the management have enough what? Enough idea of maybe what is controls in the organization. So control environment is about the top management. And this one we say it means the attitude, it means the attitude, it means the awareness, it means the actions of those charged with governance.